What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Ancient Wisdom, your weekly Pokemon TCG podcast. My name is Corey Roush. With me, as always, is DJ Keener. DJ, how are you?
I'm alive, Corey. It's Monday. We're recording
Yeah,
earlier than normal, and the will to live is sapped.
I mean, and the worst part is I don't think it has anything to do with any of that. It's just you're alive, so therefore it's sapped.
Always, always. What's
Uh,
up with you? How you doing?
about the same. It's a hideous day outside, but we move. Um, kind of just living the dream every day. We had a nice weekend of going to. Actually, spent both days with you, which is weird. That's not a very common thing for when we're not going to card tournaments, but yeah, it was a good time. And now we're looking ahead to the first regionals of the season. So, with us previewing this weekend's regionals, we wanted to kind of go over some of the data that we're not going to do like any necessary deep dive like we did last week because honestly, not much has changed over the last 2 weeks, like to that extent. So, we're going to kind of go over some of the trends that we've seen and then make our predictions for the two regionals that are happening this weekend. But before we get into that, what have you been liking over the last week or so? What have you been playing with?
I've played a little bit less in the last week, probably than normal. I don't know why. I guess just been kind of busy. Um, so like I've played a lot of Miraidon because that's my go-to quest completion deck on PTCGL. It's just like fast games. One of the quests that pops up occasionally is to put like three EX Pokemon into play, which can take like 3 games with Guardian, 1 game with Miraidon. Um, so I've been playing a decent bit of that. Still working on the deck. It is like fun to play. It's just kind of not
Yeah.
quite there. And like there is definitely a world where it gets there. Um, we're like I don't even know if we're like a printing away more so than like a meta game away from it being good.
Yeah.
But we're not there yet, and we'll see if we ever do get there. But been playing a decent bit of that and a decent bit of Mew, but nothing too exciting for either of those. Just the kind of straightforward decks that are good to get some missions done with because you can play some games pretty quickly and nice stuff. What about you?
Plenty of Guardy because I'm just convinced that I'm not sure that that's what I'll necessarily play next set. I feel like it's obviously too like while I'm testing this format to learn the new decks and everything that's like in it, I also want to kind of like figure out what to look forward to since it is the next time we're going to something. But like Guardy obviously translates to both, right? I feel
Mm-hmm.
like it's good it's going to be good in both. I'm trying to decide whether or not I want to buckle down and buy a Champions Festival. Obviously that does not apply to this format, but if I don't like, if I actually just generally hate playing Guardy, like that takes it out anyway, unless it's like tier 0. So I've been playing that a bunch and I've enjoyed it. Other than that, I'm always gonna play some amount of Lost decks. I'm with you in that I play Miraidon whenever I need a quest for the EXs because I'm not gonna get to the Guardies fast enough. But I never, unlike you, I don't enjoy playing it. So, what else? Oh, and lately, and it's the deck I'm actually gonna bring to locals tomorrow. So by the time this is out, it'll already have happened. But Jake Gearhart tweeted it. We had talked about it some last format or like coming in last like before the format started to get prepared for this, where it was the Gardevoir package plus Kyogre and playing like a bunch of water dudes and just kind of like plowing through to the end of your deck and then winning the game with Kyogre, doing something of what like Lost Box does, but it kind of gives you a bunch of different water avenues. Like the number of times like you attack multiple times with Greninja, which is obviously very good, or with I don't remember where the other Kyogre is from, the one that just is
Crown Zenith.
okay, yeah. So that one is water, water. I think it's water, 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 colorless, and it puts 3 back in your hand, and you do a 180 to one thing on the board, which is obviously a very strong attack. So it's basically just prize manipulation. You have a couple different cool things that you can do, whether it be with a 1/1 Palkia line to Star Portal out of nowhere, or with like I said, the Kyogre from Celebrations is one of our favorite cards to mess around with. Some lists play Crabominable. I am right now, just because being able to just kind of pop off and blow something up, like a lot of times, like they think that like decks like that'll think that they can just camp a Gudra, and just not actually ever have to worry about anything. But if you're able to kind of like early on in the game sprinkle 90 with the Greninja onto that while they're not even thinking about it, like you're like, well, I'll take one price here and 90 there, and if they don't ever like moisture start off, which they probably should, but you never know. Like if they don't know the deck, they don't know that the crab's coming in to eventually just hammer them to
Mm-hmm.
death. So I don't know. It's a cool deck. I don't know. Like I
I
said, I
think
don't
the
know
deck is
if it's like
awesome. I think it's
I don't know if
really
it's like
really cool.
I don't know if it's good, but it's really fun. And for this interim time where we're just kind of learning the format, it's kind of nice to just mess around with something fun.
No, it's one of those decks that I played a bunch before rotation when I was just like playing decks on live that like could exist for the new format without like some of the cards that weren't out yet, obviously. And that deck is just awesome. It's a lot of fun. It
Yeah.
does something kind of unique, I guess, in a sense. Like, yeah, Lost Box can do the Kyogre thing, but like this deck can like really pull it out of nowhere. It's just really interesting. You can like I've seen lists that play double of the Celebrations Kyogre even. You just like that's your game plan. You just Kyogre them
Yeah.
out of the game. But I like the inclusion of the Crown Zenith Kyogre, a lot of the other like tech options for attackers. Like Palkia is really good in there, so definitely just a cool deck.
Yeah, it's neat, and it's again not that this is like it's really nothing like the deck that we're gonna look at whenever we get to the next format, but it's kind of cool to start messing with some of the water options that are out there to see if I want to kind of translate them to when we get
Yeah.
the back scat. Like it's a totally different deck, but it's like a similar thought process of I feel like anytime you get like a oh, I haven't used this energy as like my sole basis of a deck for about a year.
Mm.
What all different things could I tech into here? I'm kind of exploring some of those tech options now, 3 months before I'll actually be exploring with Excalibur. So it's kind of a cool thought exercise as well.
There's a little bit of an interesting like carryover there too, where it's like here are my water attackers with my stage 2 setup Pokemon, right? Like,
Yep.
it's not entirely the same because you're also kind of relying on this Curly as early too in this deck, but like you are trying to put a stage 2 in play to power up your really strong but kind of clunky water attackers. So there are
Yeah.
like a lot of similarities. This deck is doing something very different for like its end goal with it, but you're still kind of you can draw some parallels there for sure.
Yeah. So I've had fun with that, and I'm just like, I really enjoy this format, and I guess it's now that we're back to actually going to events. Like
Mhm.
this is the first time since COVID, but like so since that time period where there's going to be an entire format where I don't go to a real event in.
Yeah.
So that's kind of weird, and it's allowing me to like, while I want to learn everything, I'm not like hyper focused on I have to play something that I necessarily think is tier 1 all the time, which is a nice change of pace.
Yeah, for sure. And it is kind of freeing to not be as worried about like putting reps in with like the current version of Lost Box that you think is the best or whatever. But I still think it's kind of just like good brain exercise to be paying attention to the metagame and figuring out how you would like what you would play that week and what that means. See if you were right or sometimes it's tough because maybe you made a call and nobody else made that call. That doesn't mean you were wrong. So
Yeah, oh trust me, I made myself play a bunch of, and I didn't mention this already because like I'm embarrassed even a minute, but I've played a fair number of games with various arc pile lists as well, and like that, I mean, I think some version of arc is actually like I mean obviously it won the most recent events. I'm not like going out on a limb here saying that I think it's good. I don't
yeah,
know if
it's
it's
not
the
a
same one.
crazy call
Yeah,
to make, but right.
I think I think Arc is good. I don't enjoy necessarily playing Arc, but I also would enjoy doing well. So like if I
Yeah,
found
it takes one half a dozen the other.
yeah, so it's tough. So that is going to be one of the decks I want to talk about, but we'll get there. So where do you want to start with? You have some of the data that you wanted to talk about going into this weekend.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to just touch on like the play rates for some different decks, where we're at, and like what decks are kind of over and underperforming in the metagame. And one of the things, I guess, just to go break down. Oh man, this site is different on PC than it is on your phone. There we go.
That's funny.
All right, there we go. One of the big things that so like for the data, I could combine a couple decks just for like transparency if anyone pulls anything up, and we do use like Trainer Hill to get a lot of the different numbers that we use for things. And one of the things like in the last 7 days, it's gone from being kind of like a decently played deck to the most played deck when you combine the Mewtwo version. Guardy is like almost far and away the most played deck at this point online. Which is interesting because the other most played deck is Lost Box. So Guardy is at like 16, over 16.5%, almost 17% of the metagame share when you count both versions. Which I think they're basically the same deck. It's more of a tech attacker that you play in Guardy, not a different deck, right? I think you would agree with that.
Yeah.
And then when we say Lost Box there, it's Greninja Lost Box, but that's the next one with like 13.4% of the metagame share. And you can follow that up with a host of different decks, but I want to touch on those two first because the big thing here is that means Guardy is the most played deck, and its worst matchup is the second most played deck. And that really bears out in the numbers. I looked at the top eights from all of the bigger tournaments from the past week. My count was kind of arbitrary because there were like 3 tournaments over 100 and then 3 that were above 90 or something like that, maybe 3 and 3. And I just used those 6 for my numbers. But or maybe there was one more. I don't remember. It's not important. But
No.
Guardy converts at like a way lower rate than its play rate to top cuts. Like it's like 17% of the metagame, and it takes up like 10 to 11 ish percent of top cuts in those fields. which is a pretty sizable drop off. Like you can see some other decks that are pretty close to their win rate or that drastically overperform, and the metagame is just really hostile towards Gardevoir still. So that was like the big takeaway from that. And the other one was that Lost Box, like despite being that played, pretty much converts it exactly its play rate. Which is, do you think that's because of how much play Guardy's seeing? Do we think Lost Box has gotten better suddenly, or because we
No, I
weren't
think
happy with its position a week or two ago?
I think that certainly helps. And I think that that's something that it was called out at the time, and then we kind of talked like, but not by us, by
Hmm.
like people that were at the event, and then like as we've been like when we talked about Lost Box a lot last week, that was one of the things we said was that given current lists, I think that like obviously Lost Box does go in pretty favorably to Guardy. I think both are probably in need of adapting. If Guardy
Hmm.
doesn't adapt, and if they're just playing, well, this was towards 60 or close to it, and the cards you change don't necessarily benefit that matchup. You're trying to tweak for the other matchups that you saw do well, then you find yourself in a place where you're a little bit susceptible to things. So I think like that's my read on the situation without like diving too much into like data or anything like that. That's kind of how it comes across to me because if you don't adapt, like I mean, if you like, I think that I didn't look at all of Torch's matchups. I'm using him as an example because he was the highest placing player, obviously. But like, if you just dodge and weave and don't play like a ton of Sableye throughout the day, then like obviously you like it's not going to matter. But if that shifts slightly and you're going to like an 8 round tournament and you play 5 of them, I don't like your chances of doing well on that day. So
Yeah.
I think that's part of what it is, right? Because Lost Box matches up pretty okay into most other things. So if they're able to hit, but if they're able to hit a bunch of Guardies that have not adapted, then they're looking really good at that tournament.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that just as an idea. And you see from the numbers here that Lost Box has actually kind of fallen out in popularity a little bit, even from before. Not significantly, but like the play rate has continued to go down, funny enough, despite its best matchup going up in play rate.
Mhm.
I mean, there's something to attribute there that just like the kind of players that want to make comfy decisions are probably the kind of players that want to make curly decisions still. So,
Yeah.
like, good players are playing both decks online. The next thing that I want to touch on is that Lugia has just like crashed out of the metagame. This went from being like a top two deck in the format by pretty much everyone's standards to a deck that's like it's gone from like points where it was like a 10 to 15% play rate deck to being under 7%,
Hmm.
and still underperforming in top cut conversions. Like it's
I
not
don't
even making those numbers.
know it. I don't get it. It's so weird
Yeah,
to
I
me.
don't either. Um, Especially because Lost Box is a good matchup for Lugia. You're positive
Yep.
into them. Guardy is about a neutral matchup. They're like slightly favored against you, so I don't really get it. But when you start looking at some of the other matchups and the other decks, like I guess it sort of makes sense to me. Like a spoiler here that Lugia is not in the decks that I would even consider playing for the regional this weekend if I were going. So
Interesting. I'm surprised to hear that specifically from you.
yeah. Well, I just don't like the I don't like some of the matchup spread with some different things when I'm looking at stuff. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. But I think like so the only other deck that I really want to call out that's like way overperforming, or I guess the other things, and you mentioned this already a little bit, are the various Arceus decks are
Hmm.
essentially all severely overperforming as far as like
Yeah.
top cut conversions. And I don't think that's gonna bear out in like a drastic play rate increase actually anyway. But literally all of the versions are way overperforming their play rate. Arctura, Arctina, and then just other Arc piles. It's pretty fair, I think, to combine Arctur and Arc piles because all the other ones play Vulpix. It's kind of Arc Vulpix at this point in my eyes, even if it is like
Yeah.
primarily Duraludon
Yeah.
in
I
the
think
Dura
more often than
versions.
not, I was gonna say you're more often than not so it's like always arc picks, and then it's like maybe you play Dura, maybe you play Pikachu,
Yeah, right.
maybe some of those lists are incorporating Espeon VMAX. I've
Hmm.
seen. Um,
And that's not even counting the Arc Lost Box list, but
yeah, and then we can always talk about my favorite deck that is like I thought I saw. What did I see? It was like 25th, 24th in play rate in the last 7 days. We got some RCS Reggie Drago in there, so
yeah. That does have a top eight in there, and that certainly came off of my list and into the rogue section. But
that's weird. That's very surprising.
um, But yeah, I think that Arc is the other deck that's like way overperforming expectations, and there's definitely like a lot of good reasons to play the deck, and a lot of good reasons that it is hitting those numbers. So, just kind of something to think about from the stats instead of like going deep into what happened in the events individually. I do want to just mention the other thing, like the deck on its own that has the single most top cuts and also an extremely positive conversion rate is Mew,
Yeah.
which makes a lot of sense again when you start looking at the play rates for decks and what's doing well in the metagame. But Mew is 9% of the field and top like something like 15% of top cuts.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we've talked about this plenty. We talked about it before the format. We talked about it throughout. I think Mew's insane. I think
Yeah.
that especially like you're seeing a lot of people start to cut back on stuff like Drapion. I think like especially because the versions of Lost Box that were big with it are starting to struggle a little bit. People that were playing 2 and Go are stopping playing 2. I don't know. Like I think that it's and like even like I think the Lugia like they have the Dark Attackers there, but that matchup was already good for you.
Yeah,
And
you're pretty favored in a Lugia still, in my opinion.
and like if they're cutting back on like in that on them in any way to start fitting in the 1/1 Dura line, or in some cases the 1/1 Urshifu line, like that just becomes even more free for you. So yeah, I think Mew's an incredible play for this weekend.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But yeah, I think that's really everything on the stats. I think a lot of other stuff like we can kind of touch on. I guess the one deck we talk about a lot that I didn't touch on there is Gudra, which is still like it's funny because it's more played than ever before at this point, and it's still like converting decently. But there's something about the deck being like on everyone's radar that makes it a lot less attractive to me.
Well, almost, and like I love Gudra. It's the deck I've probably played the most over the last month, and I just like I think it's just tough because I liked its matchup spread a lot going into EUIC, but if Gardevoir is going to be this highly played, that matchup sucks. So I just that would scare me off because I don't, even though I don't know if I think Gardevoir is the best call for this weekend because it does have that target right now. I wouldn't want to like face more than 3 of them with
Yeah.
Gudra on day one, and I think that that's a pretty reasonable possibility. So I think the deck is still well positioned, but like there's some decks that you can take to a tournament almost any week and feel comfortable about it, and there's some where you really have to pick your spots where it's
Yeah.
that next
And you
week,
think
even if it's like
Goo is like a deck that you need to pick the right metagame to play it into?
yeah, even if it's like I think I wouldn't say it's at that point. Obviously, it's not tier 1, but I think it's like high tier 2 or tier 1.5 or whatever nonsense like label you want to put on it. I think it's like still one of like the better decks in the format, but it is much more volatile to the circumstances where some things just go in and go whatever. I'll take 50-50s across the board. That's
Yeah.
not good.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with any of that. I think that Goo is like a fairly safe play despite that. But it's not like as well positioned as it was before. The thing that Goo will always have going for it is that it's better against the other Lost Box decks, right? It's better
Yeah.
against Sablezard, it's better against Greninja Lost Box. Like you're favored against all of those decks. And when you put those together, you're still looking at probably 20% of the field at any given tournament right now. Maybe slightly less, but probably 20% of the field. And
To be fair, I
go
would say that it's not great into the Giratina one, and if the online results
not
from
counting
a week
Giratina.
but like if the we know where we stand on the Giratina Lost Box list, but the results over the last like 2 or 3 weeks make it seem like that might be something people actually bring to the tournament, and if that's like that matchup is not great either. So that's another thing that kind of gives me a little bit of pause.
Yeah, I have a feeling the Tina will be the same way it was at EUIC, where like the same thing. It was seeing play online, but everyone, like not everyone, but a lot of players whose brains work were like, it's actually not that good. And
I tend to agree, but
then
it's
they're not.
just
It's
something
like I mean, and even still, like its play rate is still only 6% of the field right now in online events in the last week. Like it's not highly played either. And even if it was like better than that looks, I don't expect the play rate to change significantly because of that.
yeah, that's fair.
Um, do you want to just take that as a segue actually then and talk about how we
Yeah.
feel about each deck at the event?
Yeah, let's do that.
Because we've kind of been doing that about Gudra, and just to like kind of hammer home the rest of the points, like Gudra's bad against Mewtwo, which we said was a good deck. Mew as well. I guess Mewtwo is a cardigan right now.
Yeah.
It's bad against Mew. It's bad against Guardy. It's a very known commodity. Like it's a top 5 play rate deck, so everyone's gonna have a plan for you, even if that's like. I would bet a lot that you'll see more Lost Box decks doing like Horn Kyogre so that they have an easy plan for that matchup because that plan was good anyway.
Yeah.
Same thing, like the Sablezard decks are going to play Horn and be ready to go Charizard, Horn cross switcher for game.
Yeah.
So I kind of off Goo for that reason. I guess like is that where you're at with Goo too? You just don't feel like it's a good call for the weekend at this point. Like
Yeah.
yeah, okay. I think that is kind of what I was alluding to with the play rate. Like it's just not good when that deck is a known commodity, or at least when it's a known commodity when it's on the radar as being like good. It's
Mhm.
just not a deck that like it's a deck that everyone can have a plan for. Like even Lugia, that was another solid matchup for it, and the Urshi thing is becoming somewhat present. So like
Mhm.
that's another spot where now they'd have a way to one shot you again. Just not great all around.
Yeah, and even the Dura is like bad for you as well. So like if they're playing either of those, like
Yeah, yeah.
obviously the Urshifu can bomb right through you, and that's a little bit better. But just giving Lugia access to like a shred attack that just ignores that like your damage mod is just like you're trading two shots then, but they're also probably picking out your prizes and they're able to switch back to a
Right.
one prize game to an extent. So because yeah, I don't know, I just think that it's a pretty hostile format for Goo this weekend.
Yeah,
I'd
I
say.
agree. I don't think there's nothing I like about Gil. So what about Guardy? We've kind of talked about the deck a little bit. How do you feel about that one going into this weekend?
Uh, I I like it. I don't think it's the best, like my favorite call for the weekend, just because if you're not, like I said, if you're not adapting to Lost Box, whether or not like we've seen Lost Box kind of tail off in terms, like I mean, not tail off because we just detailed how highly played it is, but if even if like 3 weeks ago we
It
thought
is
it was the
drop
best deck
down
coming,
though, right? Like it is,
yeah,
play rate wise.
yeah, it's not like the best deck that everyone thought it was going to be coming into the format, but it's still a very real presence and it's something you're going to face a ton. And that if you're not going to adapt, and I don't really know how you adapt to deal with
So
Sableye
that's
is
the
the
problem.
issue.
Guardy doesn't deal with Lost Box,
Yeah.
especially not with Greninja Lost Box. Like you're forced to play this mana fee, which sucks. You're forced to, I mean, some people believe in the Cresselia as like helping in the matchup. I guess I still don't personally really see that because they shouldn't be like sprinkling damage counters as much. They know you can play it. Just bomb a Curlia. Don't try to get cute and take multiple prizes. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, yeah, you got rid of two of your damage counters. Okay,
Well, and like
cool.
that's the thing, right? Is that typically like the people that were like spreading out damage for turns where they were taking multiple knockouts as opposed to just taking one quickly were typically the better players. The better players have
They
also
know.
probably figured that out. So
I mean,
you're
like,
not like
good.
no, just kidding. You're like the chances of you taking advantage of somebody not seeing that at this point is
Mhm.
pretty slim.
I mean, there are like turns where like just taking two damage counters off is enough to turn it from 2 to 3 attacks to kill 3 Curlias. But at the same time, like you're already pressuring that by playing Manaphy, which they're gonna want to kill so that they can use Guard or Greninja to get attacks. Greninja just kills them. There's no Cresselia game plan there, so that doesn't matter. Um, and like there's just nothing else in Engine that you can really do that helps the matchup, right? Like there's nothing that's impressive at least. Um,
Are you at all interested in something like bringing the jelly back in so that like if you power up like a Gardevoir or sorry yeah Gardevoir or a Zacian that you're not also stuck with it there having two like 20 life left? Is that something that interests you at all, or
Not
I,
really. If
I'm just
I'm
trying to talk out the possibility.
if I'm
That's all.
playing cards to improve the Lost Box matchup, I'm playing Mewtwo. Mewtwo is the
But
card that's good in the Lost Box matchup. Mewtwo is 4 bricks. I don't think it's worth it. I think the correct answer is to just ignore the matchup. Um, and then the Mewtwo doesn't even like if you play Drapion and Mirage Box lists, like the Mewtwo doesn't even really bear out that way as being like a real win
yeah,
rate increase. They just Mirage Gate onto Drape and then kill it. So it's just not that good there either. You could take some sort of bet and say, well, they're going to play Kyogre, so they're not going to play Drapion, which is like a fair line to take, but I just don't even think it's worth it at that point. I'd rather just like make my deck really consistent, some percentage of games Lost Box bricks. I have a Manaphy for the Greninjas, and just like hope that that's good enough. But to me, there's no chance that that's good enough, so there's no chance that I'm playing Guardy. And all of that is even like discounting that there's a Galarian Moltres version of Lost Box that like I'm not personally into, but it exists and is running around, right? So
yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. So beyond that, like, how do you feel about like? I know that that's obviously like the biggest issue we theoretically have with Icardi, but beyond like, I think we've both come to really enjoy the deck over the last couple weeks.
yeah, it's a fun deck to
Whereas
play.
whereas like when we first saw it, we did not like not first saw it because we knew we were going to end up liking it. We just didn't think we necessarily like it immediately. Would you like? Is it something that you'd actually be considering like you yourself this weekend, or
Not a
would you be
chance.
on? Okay, that's where we're getting.
Yeah, 0% chance. It's a hard off for me. And kind of touched on it already, but like I think Lost Box is very highly played. I think Mew's going to be very highly played. Those are both bad matchups for Guardy. And if you're telling me that 30% of the field is probably those two decks, which does not seem like a far cry, right?
No.
And then if we add in another at least 10% for Guardy Mirrors, like, yeah, there's obviously skill expression, but like unless you're one of the best players in the world, you're obviously not like hoping to play mirrors every round.
Yeah.
Like as much as I am confident in myself in card games, I would not like to play that deck and go, "Ooh, I'm going to play against Tord in the mirror." Not
Yeah, that's
not ideal for me, right? I mean, not ideal for literally anybody. Nobody gets
yeah,
up and goes, "Ooh, I want to play mirrors." Like even like those guys, like Tord probably wouldn't go, "Ooh, yeah, I want to play Guardy mirrors against like Schultz or anybody like that," right?
yeah,
Like you know what? That's just not how you like get excited to play in tournaments unless like I don't want to say you're high on your own supply, but like you have to really, really be there.
yeah.
So that's just like 40% of matchups that I'm just not thrilled to take, though. So I just don't like the deck spot.
No, that makes sense.
um,
That makes sense.
and maybe there's like something somebody finds. Maybe somebody gets really good list of the Mewtwo version. But for me, it's just out. What about you? Would Guardy be in the decks you're considering playing, or
Um, no, it is. It would be to the extent that of the decks that of the decks that I've played a bunch of, it's probably the best. But I
Mhm.
also think if I was preparing for an event, I probably would have grinded more with the decks that I think are much better positioned. So,
Sure.
like, it's probably a no for me. Like, yeah, if we did, if like, I guess my point is, in a real preparation stance, no. If you called me today and said, "Hey, I'm
What's the
surprised
deck you're
we're
the most
going,"
comfortable to play? We're going to Portland.
yeah, we found out we just got free tickets and free entry into the tournament we're going right now. It's of the things I've played, it would probably be that. But yeah,
That makes
no,
sense.
I don't think it's real for me beyond that.
Yeah, no, I mean, instead of be played, it's going to be more played than it was at UIC, I would bet, even, which kind of
I
is
think so.
definitely something that's informing the rest of my decisions too. I mean, I think the uptick in play online will translate to real life, and that'll translate to
Yeah,
my other choices. So, I mean, we already covered it. That's really the thing that's above all else, knocking Goodra out of playability for me. I just think there's going to be too much Guardy, and I don't want to play a deck that's like that.
I agree. So that kind of does it for that deck, and let's kind of move along. So and really for like some of like the lower tier stuff, and then there's other stuff that I don't think you like. Even if I don't know if we put it in that regard or if we put it lower, higher, wherever. I don't think I know Inteleon, Urshifu, and Miraidon and stuff like that have been seeing play. I don't. You're not bringing either of those to any
No,
sort of
those all
event.
kind of fall into the legit rogue category to me at this point. There was a period very early on where I thought Hershey was really good. Um, like way was out performing its play rate and everything, but it's just kind of fallen off. Lost Box has fallen off a little bit. They're more familiar with like what you're doing. So no, I wouldn't be surprised to see that deck like spike or anything because there definitely will be enough decks playing comfy that you could get lucky. But nah, off that one, Miraidon's bad. Um,
Yeah,
that covers those. I think that that's sort of yeah, those are sort of the rogue decks. I think I like they're not so different from something like Arcdura or Arctina on play rate, but I think those are like just better decks. They'll see a higher share of like a winner's metagame, and you know you should be a little more prepared for those. I think than Hershey.
yeah. No, I agree completely. So okay. So then now I feel like we're kind of getting into the things that we think are real, and we've talked about all of them briefly before. And I think the one you rolled out the most so far is Lugia. So I know you said you wouldn't necessarily play it this weekend, but do you also think that means that it's not going to perform well, better than before, worse than before? Where do you see Lugia finishing?
I don't think it's performing better than last time because it put two into. It was the only multi-top 8 deck at UIC. There was another copy in like top 16, I think. I don't remember specifically, but like
No, but that sounds right.
the deck did very well at a UIC. I don't know that it does better than it did at UIC. I think better would be a big ask. Um,
Yeah, when I said when I stumbled over the word better, it was more about like will it perform better than it's performed over the last few weeks online, not necessarily better than a UIC.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see it perform better than it did the last couple weeks online. Yeah, I think Lugia is still good. Like it's also linear. It like linear sounds bad a lot of the time. It's proactive in the sense that
Yeah.
like you have a game plan, you are initiating it, and if you hit, like you're winning a lot of the time when you hit. The hit rate's still good. There's some issues in that like Guardy, same reason that it's kind of pushing Goob out a little bit for me.
Yeah.
Like Guardy can just murder your guys pretty well. I think like the play rate of Guardy means that you almost have to keep the Evital in, which you really didn't want to. Um, because it turns out you like don't need it to beat Mew, but now you need that. But you're just being like stretched a little bit, I guess, because I also think you need to either play Dura or Urshi. Um,
Mhm.
this isn't even like an I don't like Duraludon. I've just been happier with the Urshifu, largely because I don't have to play Impact Energy, I think.
Mhm.
But you have to play one of those, and you have to play the Yveltal, and you're just like cutting into consistency spots at that point.
Mhm.
And then you are good against Lost Box, which is like really, really good, but you're still like two of the three top play rate decks not favored against. You're not like a terrible dog against either of them, especially if you're playing the Yveltal, which is why I think that there's like definitely a solid chance that Lugia does well. But for me, I'm not comfortable enough to sign up for the tournament and play against Mew and Guardy all day when I don't think either are good matchups. And add on to that, you have to respect the Mawile trap from Sablezard, so you have to put more bad cards into your deck,
Mhm.
which is like already not ideal when I'm worried about two of the top decks. You're supposed to be favored against Lost Box decks. I really don't want to throw because I didn't include an out to Mawile,
Yeah.
and that just sucks too, right? Like
Yeah.
you don't want to have to do that. It's a matchup that you're supposed to win, so suddenly I'm playing. And yes, it's just like one supporter. You're playing one bad supporter to fix the matchup, but like that
That's still
still
more than I want to.
sucks.
Yeah.
And that still sucks when like you could be doing something to either make yourself less susceptible to Path Judge with that slot, or something to make yourself better against uh these like giant damage dealing Zacians, or these single prizers from Guardian stuff, or like any
Yeah.
other disruptive card, right? Or whatever it might be. There's just like the deck has a lot of spots that are required already, and I think that it's gonna be a really, really good deck if the metagame is in a spot where you don't really need to use tech slots on deck space, and you can just play a really consistent Lugia deck if just like your core game plan is strong enough. And so like, if Gudra falls off the face of the earth because the metagame's not good for it, and suddenly we don't have to worry about this like Dura or Urshi line, we only need to worry about playing an Yveltal. Suddenly I'm higher on Lugia. If the seeming drop off of Lugia from current times and the fact that Guardy's already playing a penny to beat Mawile takes Mawile out of Sablezard decks, same thing. Lugia comes back up in play rate. I'm not confident that people aren't going to play the Mawile package,
Mhm.
and because of that, I'm lower on Lugia because there's again another matchup that you're supposed to win that you're not winning anymore.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
that's the tough part. I mean, the other good news is like if you play an out to the Mawile package, you literally just win the game.
Yeah.
You do lose a lot of time.
I guess that brings up another question I want to add. Like you've touched on it a couple times, and obviously like we'll get into that when we get into Lost Box a little bit more maybe. But like, do you think the Malwa thing is going? Like, do you think that that's going to see a bunch of play this week? Do you think that was kind of a now people know about it, it drops off some for at least for this time being, or where do you stand out with that going into? Like, obviously, we've talked
Yeah,
before.
yeah.
Whenever it comes to things like that, we'd rather be prepared and not face it than not prepared and get just our tournament run wrecked. But do you think it's going to see a lot of play this weekend?
I think I'm having a really hard time answering that one. I think if I was playing Sablezard, I wouldn't play it.
Okay.
Um, and there's a number of reasons for that. I guess if we want to just kind of transition and talking
Sure.
about Sablezard here, that probably makes the most sense. But like,
Yeah.
I think that we already know Guardy is prepared for it. Like even if it's whether it's playing Penny or there's an argument to play Arven and play an escape rope, and you can play as you already mentioned, the emergency jelly at that point if you wanted to. Both of those are like reasonable things to do in Guardy, and so it's not just game there. And against Lugia, I've seen both Thornton, Penny, and Lugia. And again, if Lugia plays the out, it's not like you know, okay, you're
Hmm.
just dead.
Yeah.
They just get you to the point because you're full committing when you do that to decking them, and
Yeah.
you can't. You've lost. So it's just not something I'm comfortable doing. Um, but it's tough to say that it's like 100% not the right call. I also think that the other matchups for Sablezard are good without doing it, and I think you're already good against Guardy just by nature of being a Sableye deck without doing the Mawile Trap thing anyway. It's just like an upside in the matchup. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's required to beat them, and I think Lugia is both likely to be prepared. Like even if half your Lugia opponents are prepared, it's bad because you've thrown those games. Um, and I'd rather just use that on like a different way to attack some different game plans and stuff. And I if you don't want to play the Pidgeot and Forest Seal Stone, that actually opens up like 3 spots in your deck. It's not just the Mawile, so that is also a lot of deck space.
Yep.
But I mean, I also do think people will be playing it still, if that makes sense. This isn't like a good answer because like it's gonna see play because if you were gonna play Pidgey and Sealstone either way, which some people would play without Mawile,
Yeah.
now it's only 1 card slot, right? Like it's the calculus depends on what you deem to be worth it as far as those cards go. Obviously, if you play Mawile, you have to play the whole set. Like you can play Pidgey Forest Seal without playing Mawile. But like if you in your head are like, I'm definitely playing Forest Seal Pidgey, like suddenly the Mawile is just like 1 card, it's a tech attacker. There's some other spots where like it'll at least force some action that your opponent doesn't really want to be doing in some other matchups, or even if you just like can count somebody's switches and they've burned them all or whatever, there's spots for it.
Yeah.
But for me, I would not be playing it if I was playing Sablezard.
That makes sense. Yeah, I kind of feel the same way in that, like, I obviously understand the utility of it, but in the same way that I wouldn't necessarily like the control deck that kind of built around that to an extent for this, like, I just think people know. Like, I think like, it's one of those things that, like, not like it's an oversimplification, especially when we saw that format that people just didn't adapt. But a lot of the time, I feel like you can't bring that back to back weeks, and we already saw it do at least reasonably well, and like people knew about it there.
Right.
So like if they were already preparing for it, and now like the for lack of a better term, like the layman, the person that's not in like the in groups of people that are going around with all of the worst kept secrets, if everyone knows about it now, I just assume that like it's as easy as like playing like a one card out, whether it be the penny or the switch or the escape rope or what have you. I just think that like I understand its merits, and like it's one of those things that, like, if somebody did spike because people weren't prepared, it would not shock me. That's why we saw Duraludon win multiple events or top multiple events last format. But like, I would not be signing up with it. I'd already cut it from my Sablezard list, and I didn't really miss it at that point. I was just kind of trying to figure out the rest of the matchups without it because it just, to me, it just never really did enough. So yeah, I'm kind of on the same page.
Yeah, it was out of mine as well. I mean, and again, like it does make sense that Lost Box decks are unfavored against Lugia in general. I guess I'm not super confident to say that Sablezard is just by nature unfavored into Lugia. I know regular Lost Box is from experience, like Mirage Gate Lost Box. Maybe Sablezard's a little bit better, because you do have those ways to just like one-shot this Charizard and the Tyranitar a lot easier than the other decks do on that like one prize package, which is interesting. But it just hasn't... I don't feel like the Mawile is bringing enough to the table, and I wouldn't want to put my eggs in that basket as the Mawile player, but the existence does make you respect it. I assume Guardialists are still going to play Penny, which actually I've kind of come around to if you're playing Luminion to being like a necessary inclusion either way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, you want to be able to clear the fish. And something that I had found during my gameplay was that you do have a lot of like middle turns where you don't want to play a supporter. You've hit the point where your hand is too fat for you to play research, basically.
Yeah.
And unless you had like enough energies that playing the research would score you a KO, you're not going to play it. And the way that like supporters are lined up in the deck, there's a lot of turns where it's just like, I mean, I can't burn a utility supporter right now. I can't burn a research on this hand. I can penny up my fish. So I think that's like just good value in general either way. I think that I'd be pretty happy with that. I did briefly try Thornton in there because I like Thornton and Lugia. It's just too much worse. Being able to pick the fish back up and then play it again later is really important in Guardy.
Yeah.
But either way, like your opponents are going to be ready for it, so no. But that would not discourage me from playing Sablezard.
No, not at all. I really like Sablezard this weekend.
I think the spot for Sablezard is really good. I think the bad matchups for the deck are purportedly Mewtwo Gardevoir if you separate them, which makes a little bit of sense. You can't one-shot it ever, and it doesn't care about Sableye. But your Guardy opponents aren't setting up if you're Sableyeing them, right?
Correct. Yeah.
The other poor matchups are all of the Dura decks, like all of the Arceus decks, excuse me, and the Lost Box Mirror. You're bad against Greninja Lost Boxes, at least per stats, which is why, as we talked about a little bit last week when we did our deep dive, that it's like, oh, I guess you have to play double Comfy.
You mean double Mana?
Or double Mana, excuse me, Fee.
Yeah.
But like, in the Mana Fee does solve this problem too, but that gets worse if we're saying that we think we'll see an uptick in Kyogre, because there's another card that can take multiple prizes in the mirror match then. So I do like Sablezard a lot. which decks it's bad against specifically gives me a little bit of concern.
Yeah, yeah, it would be high on my list of things that I was considering, but I don't know.
For me
It's
personally,
it's not my
it's in
number
my
one.
top 3 decks. It's in the 3 decks that I would consider playing this weekend.
Yes, yeah. I just think it's probably definitively three.
Yeah,
So
yeah. No, for me, it's the third deck. Yes, absolutely. It's kind of the odd man out once I start thinking about it a little bit deeper than that. And then there is one other deck that's like, I guess, like my 4 that I definitely wouldn't play, but I do think it's like a reasonable choice. Which I guess let's move there. Well, go ahead.
I'm gonna guess that's my 2, so that's interesting.
Okay, what's your 2?
I would probably I as much as I hate to say it because like I think if we tested I'd probably end up throwing up while doing it. I'd be pretty high on an arc pile this weekend specifically, and this is going to make you laugh even more given the conversations we've had. I think I really like where Arc P stands.
That does make me laugh. If it makes you feel any better, we're on different Arceus decks. I would play Arctina.
Interesting. I like, and that's fair. I really like Arctina. Like really like is obviously a loose term because I don't like playing Arc. But if I was going to like playing Arc, I really like Arctina. Would you play Pikachu in Arctina?
Yeah, I would play a
Vulpix
Pika
in
in there.
Arctina?
I would play a Pika in there. You could sell me that I could play Vulpix instead of Pika, I guess. That's like a separate... Maybe that's the right answer, I guess. Maybe that's better against Guardy. I hadn't really considered that, actually.
Well, now that's what I'm going to be building now.
Yeah,
like,
so maybe I should be playing Arctina picks instead of Arctina Peak, yeah.
Which, like, it's... You know what? Now that you said that, it doesn't make me throw up my mouth as much anymore. Because
Yeah. Also, like, if you feel like spending money, think about how gorgeous that deck can look.
Well, the golds are all under 100 now, so there's that.
Yeah, that's the part of that that's going to be the problem. Definitely not the Giratina Vs.
I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, yeah, I just think the deck matches up pretty interestingly. I'm still not sure. Like, are you gonna play kind of do the Szymanski thing of playing 2 Drapion because otherwise you don't like your Mew matchup? Because I think
not in Arctina because you have choice belts and your team is one shot Mew. And if you switch it to Arctina picks, suddenly you have full picks that also one shots for 0 energies if you don't Starbirth.
That's wow.
So
the more we're talking about this, the more I really like where that's positioned.
Yeah. I was, without even switching it to Vulpix, I was just like, I'll just play multiple choice belts. Suddenly my Mew matchup's a little bit better. I mean, you guys are both happy to play Judge Path, but like,
yeah,
either way, you never want to be Judge Pathed when you're not prepared for it. Like, Mew Judge Paths with the intention of clearing it.
Yeah.
Not just willy-nilly, right? It's very methodical in that deck, whereas this deck can just play it, just doesn't care. You get to play Sharon Scares and just do like the Arceus tank stuff for Lost Box matchups. You have some game there, as well as, again, Judge is good against that deck. You get to play 4 Judge. Just like a lot of stuff, yeah. I mean, and you could probably bring me full circle here and me say that Arc Pika Vulpix is the deck that I would play, I guess. It's not Arc Dura, and this isn't an I don't like Dura stance. It's I think everyone is prepared for Dura.
Well, no, and I think I've referenced this a number of times when talking about it, but Szymanski himself, who won the event with the deck,
said it was dog.
Yeah, he's like, I'm not playing that again. That's crap. Everyone knows what it is now. It's not actually good. It was just good whenever people weren't prepared for the Dura. People are prepared for the Dura now. So, yeah, I'd be pretty far off that. So I think we're on the same page there.
Yeah.
I know we don't love playing Arc, but this is the first time. Like, even whenever there's been times, like I said at the beginning of this, I think it's good. This is the first time I'd probably almost be. You could maybe convince me.
Absolutely.
Because it just feels very well positioned and having the optionality that gives you. I really like Bibarel in this format. I don't know if you play it. Like the more attackers you put in, the faster the Bibarel probably falls out because if you're looking at the Tina list, they have space for it. But once you start putting picks in and stuff like that, space gets tight.
Yeah, so a lot of Tina lists play like a 1/1 Pika line. Even if you turn that to picks, you still have space for some Bibarels if you want to play them. I think also, especially if you're doing the Vulpix, and I wouldn't have played the Drape anyway, but you're letting yourself not play Drapion, depending on how you set your deck up, whether that's multiple choice belts or if it's playing Vulpix. Probably only need one choice belt. Even if you play Vulpix, you probably buy yourself an extra card slot actually, which is nice.
I've seen some people that are playing one choice belt and one of the gloves. Do you buy into that at all, or at that point just I guess the rationale?
I buy into the gloves. Yeah, the gloves is definitely reasonable. It's good against Mew and it's good against Guardy. That actually should be. That's correct. That's definitely correct. I haven't played enough with the deck. Just in my head, thought about it. and
Yeah, because
like
you usually
looked at
think
the
of the
matchup
gloves as
spread.
something to like hit a Sableye or hit a Comfy or hit a Ralts for like decks that are trying to like do cheeky damage or stuff like that. But like
Well, it's
here,
so
I think
funny because it's in my Mew list already. I just didn't port that logic over to this deck.
yeah, that's what it's yeah. And it's because but you're thinking of it in the Mew deck. Are you thinking of it for Gardevoir there? So you
Both.
can one shot a Guard. Okay, yeah, that's what I mean. So it's cool that
Yeah.
it can actually. That's good utility, and I remember whenever people first started talking about that card, I just rolled my eyes and didn't get it. And the more I think about it, the more I'm like, you know what?
It
I get
depends
it.
what you're talking about it for. There's a big
Yeah,
piece there of like what is your intention. Like there's some argument to be made for like this is so off topic, but like you could go, ooh, you can play it and put it on a Luxray and Rhydon, and now you're attacking through Comfies, but you
yeah.
ignore that you would need another plus power still. But
No, but I
it's
get
like
your point.
yeah, there's a game plan there, or you put it on Reggie Alecki V, and you get to switching bolt back into that whatever the hell its name is every turn, like a clef key. Like
Klefki, yeah.
you know what I mean? Like you're finding outs there, and it's like that stuff's cute. And Rhydon could use it to one shot Guardies as well, so don't take that like the wrong way. I guess don't take that out of context, but it is a lot better when you're playing it in a deck where you're like, oh yeah, also I can bomb your thing. This is making it so that Guardy EX can actually be one shot.
Yeah.
Which has
Yeah.
been like a big problem for a lot of decks, right? Decks that can one shot Guardy definitely have an advantage.
Yeah, yeah. That wow. I can't. I really don't like that we've gotten to the point where I'm like, you know what I'm going to build after this is Arceus, but
No, the talking about it has actually put it above. It's probably my third deck over Sablezard. Actually, I really like Sablezard, but I don't love the idea of playing a Lost Box deck that's worse than the Lost Box Mirror.
yeah,
But yeah,
makes
I
sense.
think Arceus, maybe we'll agree to say Arceus of some sort
Yeah,
is definitely like a top choice, and I think that it is extremely well positioned. Um, my issue with Arceus in general is that the decks aren't especially consistent at getting multiple things set up. And when I think that Mew in the fast version of Lost Box, to obviously the two decks we haven't talked about yet, I think it's
yeah,
pretty clear what we were getting to, are both really good. It's like way too dangerous to just have your one Arceus knocked out turn one.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's
Absolutely.
basically what puts me off the deck. Like I think if you get to set up, it's every bit as good as those decks. But I think I'm not totally comfortable playing a deck that if I lose the roll or even win the roll against the Lost Box, I might just go like, oh, here's my Arceus, here's my other attacker,
Please don't.
energy go, and they just go, all right, we'll
Yeah,
kill your thing. It's like, what am I doing now? Like manual attaching and hoping? It's just not a
yeah,
good strategy, right?
yeah,
Which just like you start to feel a little bit too die roll dependent for my liking. Even though you do, that's the big thing. You do have the tools to beat every single matchup, which definitely makes me like the deck, and I think it will do well. I think this is the highest I've been on an Arceus deck ever.
yeah.
Not ever. Highest I've been on an Arceus deck since Lost Origin came out.
Yeah, that's because like yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm not even gonna try to parse through that.
No,
That
no,
sounds
just
correct.
just throwing a time out there. There was just the point in time where Arc was obviously the best thing you could be doing, and I didn't want to get well actually for not including that time.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. Yeah. So I
And
think
actually, I'm going to give a quick shout out here because I did say I would do this week. That is my Jesse Lane build that deck. Build Arceus Giratina or Arceus Pikachu. It's idiot proof. Have at it, man.
yeah, I would agree. Jesse, if you're listening to this, which I assume you are, because what else are you doing with your life? Definitely play this. Yeah. So I guess so. I don't know. I moving on to the top two, and I guess
So this
I
isn't
kinda
your
get-
top two. I
No,
guess only one of these is in your top two. Okay.
I personally for this weekend prefer Sablezard over the Turbo Lost Box, and I don't know. I think it's like just I guess if I was answering for it would be a different answer if I was saying what would I play or what do I think is going to do well, because I don't trust myself well enough with the Turbo Lost Box that I would put it up there. Whereas for people that are like have practiced with it a bunch, I think it's a great play. So that's probably I guess it just depends on how I'm answering the question. I guess I said earlier there's a definitive top three. I think there's probably a definitive top four, and it just depends on where you feel comfortable playing the decks.
Sure. Yeah, well, that goes without saying, I guess. I guess I'm kind of always coming at this from like the vacuum of like assuming I'm comfortable playing all of the decks, looking only at what matchups are good and what I think people
Yeah.
will be playing. You know what I mean?
You have a much higher confidence in your skill than I do in mine. So that's
Well,
kind of where the
partially. My point more so is like a lot. Sometimes you'll see this on some of the other ones we've talked about, where it's like I think this is the correct deck to play, but I think this is the deck that I would play.
yeah, that's true.
Which is
That's true.
we can work backwards to where you said if we suddenly had free tickets, you would play Carnivore.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, not anymore. I think you talked me into
The
Arceus.
arc, yeah, right. Well, that's another
We
deck
did.
that you can probably play without a ton of practice.
That's what we said. We just said it's idiot proof. I'm in. I like being. I'm an idiot, and it's proof of me. So, yeah. But I think that the turbo lost, or like it doesn't even necessarily need to be like. I guess when I think turbo, I go back to the last format where I was playing Pokestop, and that's not necessarily even how you would play it. Like you probably would, but then some people will. But I think that yeah, I think just trying to like rush your way to 7 and then 10 the set like on turn like 3 is very good. It's the same thing I like about Sable's Art in the sense that
Mhm.
what I want to be doing almost every turn with Lost Box following like turn 3 is Sableyeing, and the fact that like this deck gets you there pretty quickly feels like it gives you a chance against most decks in the format. So
I think it's really easy to not fully appreciate how quickly this deck ends games. Like you
yeah,
can blind second with Turbo Lost Box, which is great. There's something just really wonderful that I don't think Pokemon talks about enough compared to some of the other games, and it's because the die roll makes less of an impact. But not caring about the die roll, just being like completely die roll agnostic, is so powerful. Um, and like, there's not a matchup or not. There's not a world blind playing Turbo, like genuinely trying to go off Turbo Lost Box, that I'm not picking second every game.
yeah,
And it's very good that none of the other top decks want second. So I get what I want every game, right? I'm getting to go where I want to. Um, you get to play Kyogre. Kyogre is very good. Kyogre is good against Mew. Kyogre is good against well, it's good against bad Lugia players, but I get that's not like the point, I guess.
yeah,
It's good in Lost Zone Mirrors because you're pressuring the cut or the Manaphy even more this way. It's good into any deck that leaves like multiple bench sitting two prizers, right? You
yeah,
know, there's just spots for it all the time, and in especially in like a Pokestop version of Lost Box, you can very feasibly go turn 1 Dragonite, kill a V, take 2 prizes, turn 2 attack with Sableye to set up, turn 3 Kyogre for game. If
yeah,
it's not turn 3, turn 4, turn 5, it doesn't matter. They're taking one prize after that Dragonite. You have a bunch of turns.
yeah.
You have the time to set it up. Um, the thing for Lost Box, like when you look at the matchup spread, this was the big thing for me. The other deck we're going to talk about obviously is Mew, which we talk about a ton all the time.
No.
We are kind of Mew aficionados over here. Um, that's like the one deck that Mew is bad against is Lost Box. So
Mhm.
you're already good against one of the decks that has one of the higher, win rates against the entire field. You have a positive matchup there. You're positive into Sablezard. You're positive into Gardevoir. You're positive into everything except for Gudra and Lugia. And we covered a bunch of reasons why Lugia is going to be on the decline this weekend. So that's positive for you. We covered a bunch of reasons that we're not high on Gudra. And the out that I'll give you there is because Lugia is on the decline, and either way, I don't think Raikou is very good. Dragonite's really good against Gudra. Just play 2 of them.
Yeah.
Just play 2 of
I,
them and play Echoing Horn to hit him with the Kyogre. Boom.
I was pretty anti to Dragonite when I first saw Grant Manley post it, and the more that we've like dug into the format, the more I'm like, you know what? That seems good.
I don't think Raikou's
Because
good. I mean,
yeah, that's the issue, right?
you can tell me
I
you would rather play Drapion or something, but I don't think Raikou's good, and you need another V, so.
yeah, it's tough. I used to really be a big like, and I guess like I am depending on what the deck is. Like I think that it's funny because I think Raikou, and this probably tells you exactly why I don't like Miraidon. Like the more as I'm talking it out, is I think Raikou's the best attacker in Miraidon,
Yeah.
and if it's not good enough to play in Lost Box, I feel like that tells you like why I feel that way.
There's a little bit of a difference there.
There
Which
there is.
that your Raikou's attack for plus 60 to 90 more most of the time.
They're still just kind of mid, but yes, I understand. It's still 200 HP thing giving up 2 prizes, and I think that's always going to be my
Yeah,
issue.
No, absolutely. That's Miraidon thrives off tempo. You need to hit that first turn, take 2 prizes,
Yep.
and then keep finding 2 prizes. Which
Yep.
that's the other reason Raikou's good because you only need to hit 1 energy off electricity generator to keep attacking.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know. I think that like this will probably be the most successful version of the deck this weekend. So while I said earlier like that I favored personally playing Sablezard, I think that this is going to be the most successful version of Lost Box this weekend. So
Yeah, no, I think this is the best version of Lost Box to play. I haven't decided if I think this is the like I am tied on this and Mew right now on what deck I would play.
uh,
And I don't know how much more I'll actually test to make a decision. I have a pretty greedy version of the deck built, like even by my own standards. I have cross switchers and horn and everything in Turbo Lost Box right now
yeah,
because the goo matchup is just pretty bad if you don't have that kind of stuff. Like you really need the extra switch. or the extra
Yeah.
gust rather, but you can't really afford to gust most turns to like set up a rope gust. And then Horn Kyogre still. And I'm not positive that you actually need the cross switchers, but once you buy into the Kyogre plan, Pokestop's actually good, and Pokestop is great for enabling cross switcher stuff, so it seemed worth kind of testing. But you do lose consistency cards. Though, in a way, like switches are consistency cards in Lost Box. But
Yeah. They're weird like that, aren't they?
I mean, because every switch is, until you've used all of your comfies, is essentially a tracking shoes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is.
So, there's like something to that, but you obviously have to, like I said, you lose some consistency cards to make the space for that stuff. So I don't know. I'm kind of still working on the list. I think I'm going to try to actually post my list on Twitter this time before the event, just to be like, this is what I actually would have played.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Hold myself a little bit of accountable and also give us a little more content,
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
But, so, I don't know. Maybe I'll post both of these. We'll see where I get to with the Lost Box deck. This is kind of what I'm working on the most right now because I feel like there's the most like to do. But yeah, to bring that all the way around, I actually don't think that any of your bad matchups will be that played. There's not like enough Mewtwo Guardy data to say that the matchup's bad. If you fear Mewtwo Guardy, play Drapion. I don't.
Yeah.
I think like you just beat them by not letting them set up, so I'm not worrying about it. But so that's where I'm at. I think this deck is actually really good.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I missed because we went back and forth there. Where you're ending up. Do you think Muse is very good, or you think the Lost Box is very good?
I said I think Lost Box is very good, and if you're worried about like the Mewtwo Guard before play Drapion,
okay, I misunderstood at the end of that conversation where you got.
You're good. So, yeah. You're good. And then the last deck, obviously, because I don't think you have anything else to say Forest Lost Box. You just haven't been deep into it.
I haven't.
Is
and
Mew.
while I haven't been deep into Mew like you guys have, I think that it's what I would play this weekend. I think it is. Like, I don't know if I want to say it's the best deck in the format right now, but I think it's I think that's the best to me. Without looking at the data, and maybe you'll be able to counter this a little bit, but it seems like it has just the most unbelievable matchup spread.
Yeah, I mean the issue with Mew is that its bad matchup is Lost Box. There are two things that Mew is not favored into, like literally two things: Sableye decks and Arctura. And the reason it's not favored into Arctura is because it's the Shemansky list with double Drapion and Alolan Vulpix. And
if they're not playing those, then
if you're not playing double Drapion, all right. We also can, hedge towards the Drapion thing. We can play the full 4 paths, which I think everyone was already in agreement that you should. And funny enough, you can play around the Vulpix too. You need to put Oricorio in your deck so that you can still set up like 5 guys. But if you think Mew's one of the best deck, Ori's good in the mirror, and it lets you put 5 Pokemon into play against Vulpix without being dead to the V-Star.
Yeah.
So all around, like that's just great. And then you just aggressively, Judge, Gust, whatever, just chase prizes against the Durant or the Arceus decks. And I think that it probably is not an actually unfavored matchup. And to say it's unfavored, it's 48.5, 51.5 by stats. But it is literally one of two things that you are sub 50% win rate against.
Yeah.
The harder one to figure out is Lost Zone. And it's funny that like we pan Guardy really badly for this, but Guardy is bad against other decks too. Guardy has other bad matchups. Mew doesn't. And you can definitely play some cards that are positive on your win rate against Lost Box that not every list has been playing before Mew. Like, I think Cleansing Gloves is a staple. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I think that it tilts things. Like, you get
your one-shots there, and you get your one-shots on Guardy. Like, that's insane. You can mess with your switch card numbers. You can play Collapse Stadium. You can play Echoing Horn to chase 2 prizers. Something that I've seen happen a decent bit is like your opponent's in a spot where they like you don't always get to pick and choose when you do your Drapion because like you're gonna get pass judge, so you almost just have to take it. Mm-hmm. But sometimes that means that you've just exposed yourself to getting Horn bossed out of the game because you gave them a 2 prizer back. Like, yeah, it took 3, but they're actually gonna take 4 prizes off your Drapion after they kill it twice.
Yeah.
Which like can happen. I think Mew's just probably my pick, but I'm curious to see if I can get Lost Box to a place that I'm happy with it. I don't know. Do you have any other thoughts on Mew, I guess? We've talked about the deck to death already, but I could talk about it more.
That's part of the thing, right? Is that like I feel like even though like I think it's the best call, I think it's like it has changed slightly. But you mentioned like the real change that there's been, and that like you're fitting the gloves in there. It is going to be probably a 4-path deck, whether or not you want to play the Oricorio. There's not a lot of other changes that are coming in right now that make it something that we have to like explain further.
I'm just
Yeah,
looking through my list right now. Yeah, I think the big thing is you do need to play a card that can empty a bench slot because I think that Horn is important in some different matchups, especially if you like. It's one of the ways again that you can flip Lost Box matchups if they accidentally give you a two prizer, which means you have to be able to make bench space. So the difficult decision to make there is whether that's Avery or Collapse Stadium for you. And if
yeah,
you're specifically trying to beat Lost Box, Collapse does play double duty.
yeah,
So
yeah. That makes sense.
there's my plug there. And then again, if you want to make Vulpix not bad for you, you can play Oricorio. That fixes that also.
Yeah.
So I've got there's my tech for you. I think Ori is good in Mew again. Congratulations.
I didn't see that coming, but I guess it makes sense when we're talking it out. So, I guess what would be your predictions for like a top cut breakdown?
Yeah, I mean I'm there's going to be Mew in top cut, probably two Lost Box decks. I'll combine like Sable's already in Lost Box when I say that, but I think two of them in top cut. A Guardy probably top cuts. At least one Arceus deck. I wouldn't be surprised if two different Arceus decks top. I doubt that we're
Yeah.
going to see like two Arcturas or anything, but I wouldn't be surprised if Arctura tops. Um, every deck that we're high on isn't bad against Arctura, so I kind of, like I said, am the lowest on that.
Yeah.
I mean, I expect a varied top eight. I think that Lost Zone is probably the only deck that we'll see multiple copies of in top cut. I guess there's a chance that Mew does. Just never seems to work out that way. I don't know. Mew doesn't dominate top cuts. This is like totally unscientific. This isn't just like Mew doesn't fill top cuts up. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think Mew will win the tournament.
I think Mew's winning the tournament. Yeah. I'm actually gonna predict two Mew in top cut. I know we like you said, but like something it just feels like way too strong for it to not.
It's so well positioned.
So I'm gonna guess two. I'm gonna guess two Mew, two Lost Box of some form, not Giratina because that deck sucks. I'm gonna guess one Arctina, and then maybe like one Lugia, one Gardevoir. I don't know if that math, but it's close enough. Like you said, I think it's a very I think it's a rather varied meta game. So
Yeah, I do too. And I think that like, so I didn't really touch on this, I guess specifically. My big criteria when I was picking decks was that I didn't want to play a deck that was bad against both Mew and Lost Box.
Yeah.
Which like part of the nice thing about picking Mew or Lost Box is that you don't have to worry about the mirror, and that this is basically what's bringing me to maybe I should play Lost Box. Because it's the one that's good against Mew. They're both good against Guardy, which will be the other top three most played deck. So, but yeah, I think Mew wins the tournament. And do you think any Goo in top cut then?
I don't. I think I
Highest
don't know
placing Goo.
Top 32.
Low on it.
I am.
Low on it.
I am. I mean, if you want to ask me about
I'm
other
there
decks that I'm
too.
low on, I don't think we see it. Like, I don't think we see a Miraidon in top 32. I don't think. I think we might see just a regular Giratina Lost Zone in top 32. I think that'll be in top 32 just because I think people will play it. But other than that, like, I don't know.
No, that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm kind of on board with all of that. Last thing that I'm kind of curious about your opinion on, I think we touched on it a little bit already, or at least I kind of gave my opinion. Does Gardevoir play Mewtwo?
I think some do. I think there's some in day two. I don't think the one at the top. The one that
do you think the highest placing Gardevoir plays Mewtwo?
I don't.
I would agree with that as well. I just don't think it's gonna make it. I think it's too clunky.
Yeah, I wanted to. I love that card, but I just don't think it gets there.
Does Control do well?
I don't think so.
Yeah, don't either. No Sander, no top.
Yeah, I don't think Sander's going to travel to what the other one's in Mexico, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he's traveling across the ocean for a regional. So, yeah, no.
And then I have one meme deck that I want to ask you about because it has been doing pretty well online, all things considered. This Kyurem deck. Best placing copy. Because there will be one in day two. I'll bet one day twos.
Yeah, I was going to say top 64, but you could see it maybe to top 32. I think the deck sucks, but I do think that. But like, if you hit enough, like I mean, it can do its thing.
I'm curious. I have not looked deep into this. If there's like matchups that are good for it, or if it's just like a deck that kind of does its thing and is decent when it does. For those of you who haven't seen the deck plays 31 basic water energies, adventures, discoveries, and just tries to set up a bunch of Kyurems and just water energy their board up.
Yeah,
it is the lamest deck of all time.
Plays a 4/4 Kyurem VMAX. It plays Radiant Greninja, and it plays Kyogre. And it says we will get there. And I like Kyogre. We mentioned we like Kyogre. I don't like Kyogre.
And I like Greninja, but I don't like 31 water energies.
Maybe we're the idiots because they've seen success, and we want to play this Guardy pile that has seen like League Cup success. But here we are. That's what I'm playing.
Listen, I will not respect anyone's deck choice that involves playing 31 water energies and 3 battle VIP pass. Play the 4th VIP pass and 30 water energies. Grow up.
Can't argue with that. I think that's the perfect way to spike the pod this week. So yeah, definitely like, follow, rate, subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. I don't often remember to say that, but probably the only people listening to this are our family members anyway. So what's the difference?
Cheers to that.
We will catch you guys next week where we'll talk about how wrong we were on this event on Ancient Wisdom.
Thanks, guys.